you then.
Thanks for watching. And of course, subscribe. You gave me a bunch of details earlier in the week about sort of your job and what you do. We know you deal with the paranormal, but we also know you deal with a bunch of other stuff as well. So can you give just a quick overview of what you do?
Yeah, okay, so the main thing I do is obviously the mediumship readings.
Right.
I also offer card readings. I do home parties. I also do small group events. I do classes, workshops. I'm certified in past life regression,
right.
Hypnosis. And I also do investigations as well.
Basically, let's start from the beginning a little bit and go back to how you first got into being a psychic medium. Like, what brought you into that field? Like, what was your first experience with that?
Oh my goodness, you're talking about
pretty far.
Full life. Oh yeah, I started having premonitions when I was 4. So I always had an interest in this. Mm-hmm. And when I was 12, the day before Bobby Kennedy got shot, right. I actually drew his assassination.
Oh, okay.
And then when I was a teenager, my mother gave me my first tarot deck, and I've been reading ever since. And I've always had an interest in the occult and the metaphysical. I grew up in a haunted house, so I'm very familiar with ghosts.
You have a little shop there called Feathers Academy, and what do you do out of your shop there?
I do readings there, so spiritual readings. I teach there along with Steve Furlong. I believe you've got Steve on in a couple of weeks.
We do, yes.
As a guest on your show. And so we're both spiritual teachers, so we teach psychic development. I do past life regression there as well.
Okay.
We've got Reiki healers there. We've got soul healers there. There's quite a lovely group, a mix of people who make up the Feathers family, and we have a little shop, so we sell crystals and cards, smudge sticks, all your spiritual stuff that you need.
So we introduced you as a internationally recognized medium, so you do mediumship over there. We know you do a lot of spiritual type work. What was your first psychic experience that you had over there?
The first time I realised that I could connect with spirit I was very young actually. The first experience, I was about 7 years old, and I was quite ill. I used to be quite susceptible to tonsillitis when I was younger, and I had a really bad dose of septic tonsillitis and a really high temperature. And whilst I was very poorly in bed, a gentleman appeared at the end of the bed, which frightened me a little bit, but I was still quite out of it with the fever. So, and all he said to me was, "Don't worry, son, we'll look after you." And then he was gone. And I repeated what had happened to my mum, and of course mum thought I was just hallucinating because of the fever at the time. But a few months later, my auntie showed us pictures. I'd never seen the photographs of my great-grandfather because there's a disconnection in the family some years before I was born. So I'd never seen any photographs, and she brought some photographs out and showed me was showing the family the photographs. And there was this guy, and I said, "Oh, that's the man that appeared in my bedroom." And it was my great-grandfather, my paternal great-grandfather.
Briefly describe for us what it is that you do as a paranormal investigator.
As a paranormal investigator, back when I used to do residential investigations, I'd get called in to check out people's claims, say, "Oh, this is happening up in the attic," or "I'm hearing this at night," that kind of thing, and then have to go try to document in the show that, these people are not crazy, there is something going on, and try to prove it, if I can, using video, EVP recording, that sort of thing. And also back then EMF meters and stuff like that as well. Right now I'm reduced down to doing video, EVP, and SRC now.
We try to have different mediums on our show that do things their own way, and we try to focus on what your way is. So want to start with just telling us a bit about what you do, and we'll start from there.
Okay, what I do.
Yeah, it's a wide open question, I know. But how about we start with the Reiki? Let's narrow that down a little bit.
I do a lot of different things. Yeah. Okay, we'll start with Reiki. Yep. I do two different kinds of Reiki. I do Asui Reiki and I do Celtic Reiki. The difference between the two is Asui Reiki is universal energy. It comes from above and through us and then into the client. Celtic Reiki comes from the earth. It's plant and tree based, and it is the way it's used is we go in through the feet and then up and out through the crown, as where with Usui we come in through the crown and out through the feet.
Basically, what led you to form that group? What happened and what led you to forming your group altogether?
Well, what led me to form the group was I am the 5th generation of women in my family that I know of who were born with, it's in our bloodline, these abilities or this closeness to spirit, whatever you want to call it. But I'm the first one in 3 generations to embrace it. So some of my aunties and my mom and, their abilities are very strong as well. But it was something that just because you have this gift, it's not for everybody. Not everybody sees it as a gift. So they grew up kind of fearing it. So we started having discussions about these kinds of things, and they told me hey, I would like to embrace this. At this point in my life, I would like to see how it can enrich my life. So we began going on investigations together, and when I saw how empowering facing not really their fears, but really embracing that and owning their experiences and who they are as women, Native women with this bloodline, I began to see how beneficial it could be for other people who might also have these experiences but not really know what to do with them in their life.
I know you were a mediumship and you discovered that at a very early age. Can you tell us a little bit about how you discovered that you had mediumship abilities?
Well, obviously I didn't start off with mediumship. It was just more being a very strong empath. I was not your typical 4 or 5-year-old that was seeing dead people walking around. Basically what it was, I was able to tap into other people's emotions, again, being very strong empath. Basically what happened was I had to live my journey, go through my life's experiences, and when I was ready, when Spirit said I was ready, that's how it kind of unfolded from there. It was after having my second son where I started really focusing on holistics. So, studying Reiki, massage, ear candling, learning all about the chakras. So once I started tapping more into my spirituality in that spiritual realm, that's when my vibration and my frequency started to become stronger and have a stronger connection. And I wasn't able to understand everything that was coming through. It was actually a friend of mine who invited me to attend a psychic expo in Toronto years ago when my grandmother had just passed. And I knew a few things about my grandmother, but she was very Catholic, so not a lot of things were brought up in regards to psychic, intuition. And so when I went to visit this one psychic that I was really drawn to, it was my first time being at one, the first thing she said to me was, I have your grandmother here who had just recently passed, and she is now passing the gift down onto you.
So you're up there in Thunder Bay, and I know we reached out to you to come on the podcast because you do a lot of work within the crystals and healing areas. Let's talk a little bit about your background. What got you into the field of crystal work?
I actually started working in energy work because of my first cat. and moved back to Thunder Bay from Nova Scotia. And the vet was trying multiple things. No matter what they did, it didn't work. And so I attended a class on healing touch. And at the beginning of the class, they had you run your hands through a person's field, see what you perceived, and then you'd pause and you'd do it again. And they went around the room. There were about 30 different people who went before me, and they were all nurses, and they talked about that something was hot or cold or soft, and none of that happened for me. Instead, what happened was that I saw specific colors in the field, and there was a pattern that formed. And I didn't know how to lie about what I perceived, so I told them, this is what I saw. And when you had us pause, an angel put their hand on my shoulder, told me what to do. I did that. The field came into alignment, and she started to glow. And the class went dead silent. And it was the first time in my life that I realized that not everyone saw the world the way I saw it, that they didn't see the colors around people and around animals, and they didn't talk to angels on a regular basis, that this was something different.
You're a pretty well-known medium here in the area, so we thank you for coming on and being a guest here on Haunting Live. We want to talk to you a little bit about your background, what you do as a medium. So let's start with that. How did you first get into the mediumship, and what drew you into that?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It's a question I get asked a lot. But I came to mediumship sort of later in life. I came to mediumship in adulthood. When I was a kid, I talk about this a lot in my book, but when I was a kid, I had a spiritual practice related to some earth-based religion practices, meditation, energy type stuff, communicating with nature. But I didn't have any mediumistic experiences, nothing major anyway. But I actually came to mediumship not through childhood, not through being born through a lineage of mediums. I chose to learn mediumship after I lost my dad. And so it was a very conscious choice for me to learn to communicate with spirit. The outside of that for me happened to be, mediumship's never easy, but it came fairly naturally to me, probably because I had already had, many years and experiences of meditation and being silent and all of that stuff. So that sort of really helped with my development. My development happened fairly quickly. But I took that time, which is important for all mediums. Good mediumship is a slow development process. And so, sitting in development circles, did all that type of thing. But that's really what brought me to it. It was actually out of my own personal loss, without having any, early childhood experiences with spirit. Other than, some of those ones that a lot of people tend to have, seeing a grandparent sit at the end of your bed, etc. But not real communication with, non-form beings. Nothing major anyway. But that's it. That's what brought me to it.
So let's start at the beginning. Tell us about how you developed your mediumship and what brought you into the mediumship field.
Well, it actually started for me as a child, and I would have very strong feelings, knowings, visions, if you will, of things to happen, things to come. I was very lucky to be raised in a family that supported that. Both my mother and father really supported that. But I was actually very frightened of it. And as I matured and life went forward, I steered away from it as much as I could. And interestingly enough, I wound up working in occupational therapy, and that's all hands-on. And as a medium, I use psychometry as my entry. So it became so strong, as I was working in the TikTok world, that I actually made a decision to leave that and start a business that we now call Trillium 2. And that was, I guess, 25 years ago. And we branched into different areas and just love every minute of it, quite frankly.
That sounds interesting. And how was the field back in those days? Was it a fairly popular topic, or were you kind of one-off and you guys were kind of the lone wolf in the field back then?
Yeah, it definitely wasn't popular. Nothing like today is. Most people, we talked about the subject. Most people, when it was taboo, didn't talk about it. Crazy, thinking that stuff. But it was interesting. The demographics was very interesting in how it works. If you were in a group, a social situation with, 4 or 5 people, and you brought the subject up, they would sort of look at you like you were crazy. But the same person, you were crazy on a one-to-one basis would have all kinds of questions. So there was a lot of interest, but not open. We just sort of didn't talk about it too much. It wasn't accepted. It's sort of like if you were to talk about UFOs 10 years ago. Okay, something wrong with it. So yeah, it was difficult. It was a difficult thing, but it was a lot more open to the idea of talking about business owners. So if somebody owned a business that you repeatedly haunted, it was pretty easy to get into that building after hours. Say, yeah, go ahead, here's the key. So it was kind of cool that way. Today you need insurance, bodyguard, fingerprints at the door. So it was a lot easier back then in certain ways. Mind you, we didn't have the technology.
Just introducing you as a psychic medium. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about and how you got into psychic mediumship work?
Sure. Well, like many of us, I think I had a lot of experiences when I was younger that were not sort of recognized for being psychic nor medium related. But I was always fascinated by the paranormal, and when I was 19, I got my first deck of tarot cards, and I started working with tarot for years. And then doing readings for myself, for my friends, and then for other people. And then during readings, tarot, of course, is just a jumping board off into connecting with spirit. And then spirits of people who had passed started coming into the readings, and they made themselves known. The first one was a very dramatic experience that happened where I suddenly felt there was a bullet in the woman I was reading, and something lodged in her back, which turned out to be a bullet. And as soon as she said there was a bullet, a man appeared to me, and he had shot her. And then killed himself. He thought he killed her, and he killed himself. So he was able to speak to her through me, and it was the first time that had happened, and it was life-changing for me. And a couple of days later, I heard back from her friends that it had changed her life, because she'd finally been able to have some closure around it, and she wasn't so grief-stricken anymore. So it was kind of a dramatic birthing into with mediumship, and then of course I have developed it and worked with it over the years, and that must have happened about 25 years ago now that happened. So yeah.
Why not start with us and start with telling people a little bit about what you do and how you got into the spiritual mediumship stuff.
Okay. I started very early as a child. I have memories of two. My mom would tell me stories where I would sleepwalk quite often, where I would tell her things that would happen. It's called deja vu, before things actually happen. And at 6 years of age, I was diagnosed as a very depressed, moody little child. Speed that up to a teenager, and I started to see and hear and experience my voices. At that time, I wasn't comfortable. Like a lot of us who were older, with society goers and telling people, oh, I see and hear things. So I kept quiet for many years, you want to call it, to actually be able to travel partly through an energy tunnel window. And it started off when I started looking out, and I saw my mom and sisters and people that I had recognized gathered in the parking lot. And then all of a sudden, the whole parking lot filled up, and this red thing disappeared. I looked up and I saw this bright shining light in the corner of the room. And I remember saying to my siblings and myself, "They're here." And it's not like my scared stood up, like a horror movie or anything, but I started to actually feel an electrical charge. And I knew that I was able to kind of go with my father all the way. But I personally felt that I was going along with my father. And I was just about to place his hand, and what I felt was the hand itself, and not a human hand. It started to look like long energy, tentacles kind of thing. And it was just about to trigger when my one sibling came running in and said, "You can't die, it can't go without you right now." And everything froze. And it was the feeling that I never had since. It was almost like walking into two different dimensions.
Let's start at the beginning and talk a little bit about how you got into the psychic and tarot reading work. What drew you into that?
Oh, a long once upon a time in a faraway land, Scarborough, Ontario. When I was little, I had a really hard time differentiating between dream life and real life. Like, I remember recalling dreams to my mother. Well, she informed me that they had to be dreams because she was like, "That never happened. We never visited Santa Claus underneath the parking lot with a big brass band, Lori. That never happened." I had the best imaginary friends. And as I got a little bit older, I started to get knowings about when people were going to pass away and when people were pregnant, which was fun at parties. So that's kind of where it started. Dreaming being this source of, there's more. There's more than just what we can touch, taste, feel, smell, right? When I bought my own first deck of cards when I think I was 20, and taught myself how to use them. So that started to sort of mesh in with dream work and searching in general. It's been a long time.